Hey, everybody out there. Once again, Paul Craig Roberts to talk about some impending dangers internally and externally. Now, it's all over the news. There's an escalation in terms of Ukraine, and Paul is here to talk about that and the real danger, perhaps the unheralded danger that it really represents. Paul.
Okay, Larry, this announcement from Biden on Sunday, 2 days ago, apparently from the G20 meeting in Brazil, very strange place for such a earth-shattering statement to emerge, that Biden has now green-lighted the use of American and NATO missiles to be launched into Russian territory by American and NATO personnel from Ukrainian territory. And this announcement came despite the clear warning from Russia that this means for certain that the United States and NATO are at war with Russia. And it comes despite the revision publicly announced of Russian war doctrine that they can respond to any such strike with nuclear weapons. So how do we explain the American foreign policy community and NATO turning a total blind eye, a contemptuous eye, to clear warnings from a nuclear superpower? How do you explain this other than the United States government is insane? There's no other explanation. It's an insane government, and all of the European governments are insane. They support this. The French support it. The British Prime Minister's been advocating it.
Yeah.
So why are they advocating taking a risk that could terminate life on Earth?
Yeah,
It
Sweden's
makes no sense.
already issued a warning to its citizens of prepare for war, an outright statement on that.
That's right. It's a good thing you brought that up. The Swedish government has now warned its citizens to prepare for war and explain to them things they can do to possibly survive nuclear attacks.
Well, what I find really curious about this is up until now, Biden was trying to restrain all this action in Ukraine and also with Israel. Now, all of a sudden, it's turned around. So, is it because they want to get something going to continue their long-range goal of deposing Putin by pressuring him with this war before Trump gets in and has a negotiated settlement? Is that why they're doing this?
I think that's one of the reasons, or that's the reason that they are using. You see, it's not Biden that was constraining the firing of missiles into Russia. It was the Pentagon. The Pentagon said no. Now, I think how they've gotten the Pentagon to go along is they have limited the firing of the missiles into Russia to the Kursk region.
Mhm.
That's the region that was not involved in the conflict that Ukraine saw was undefended and sent in the army into Russian territory.
Right.
That army has been largely destroyed. Um, so what the Biden regime did, it convinced the Pentagon that they're limiting it just to the Kursk region, which they say qualifies as a war region because of the Ukrainian incursion. And they have limited the range of the missiles to 186 miles or 300 kilometers. And so it looks like a limited version of firing missiles into Russia. In other words, they're not supposed to fire them outside the Kursk region, and they're limited to 186 miles. And so the argument is it's just part of the normal Western supply of war material to Ukraine that's being used in a battlefront area. So that kind of argument apparently succeeded in getting the Pentagon to withdraw its objection. Now, the question is, how does Putin see it? Does he see it that way? I suspect he'll be inclined to, because one thing we do know about Putin is he is very averse to having this war spin further out of control or to further widen beyond Ukraine. He doesn't want that. So it could well be that Washington has bet on that Putin will accept this new humiliation rather than have the war spread beyond Ukraine.
Yeah, but yet Putin's already announced a new approach to nuclear retaliation. They've changed their war strategy now, the doctrine, and that's another warning that if they call his bluff, he may just use nuclear weapons.
Well, you're right. The new war doctrine just recently signed says that um, any country backed by a nuclear power that attacks Russian territory uh, can expect, along with its backers, retaliation that can include nuclear weapons. So whether the retaliation will use nuclear weapons or not is not set. It's a decision to be made at that time by that event. But it is a serious risk. And the question is, why in the world is the United States government and Europe taking such an extraordinary risk?
No. Because
Uh, there's nothing to be gained.
they think that Putin won't do it, that he's bluffing. And that's the assumption they have.
Yeah, I think that's the assumption. And of course, Putin has brought that on himself because he never did anything for any of the red lines. And as I said would happen, there's going to be a red line that he has to do something about. And all he's doing is encouraging us to approach that red line. He needed to, long time ago, respond before we reached this point. Well, he didn't. And I said he's going to end up with his back to the wall at some point, and then he has to do something, and what will be done will be extraordinary. So, and I think that I've been proven absolutely correct. I've said for 3 years that the failure to end that conflict quickly has let Washington get more and more and more involved. It's essentially now a conflict between Washington and Russia. I mean, Ukraine is just the place from which it's being conducted. Ukraine is almost irrelevant to the conflict. And so I think there's a chance that this time Putin will say, well, this is a limited thing and not attacking us all over, and have an excuse not to do something. But of course, what will the next step be? It will be attacking further other territories. And at some point, he'll have to fight, or his opposition in Russia will remove him. They're not, the Russians are not going to sit there and have missiles hitting all over the country.
All right, so the plan that we assume was part of it is to keep this war going to drain Russia's military resources and to make Putin increasingly unpopular, depose Putin because of that escalation, and therefore we could get our grip on Russia again. So if that was part of the motivation, deposing Russia may have just the opposite effect. The Russian war hawks will be more firmly in charge.
Yeah, it won't be a hyper cautious person like Putin. Yeah, it, it'll be a fierce person with a fierce response. Now, what I think, to get back to your earlier question that I didn't have time to get to, uh, what I think they told Biden was, look, um, Trump is going to come in and make peace, and we'll lose the war. And so we got to box Trump in like we did in 2016. Remember, he was going to normalize relations with Russia. So what Obama did very quickly was to poison those relations by seizing the Russian consulates in San Francisco, maybe and in some other place. And then we created the Russiagate hoax that made it impossible for Putin to normalize relations with Russia because um, it could be interpreted as him being a Putin agent.
Right.
He's normalizing relations with an enemy. So they said, now we can box him in again. We'll escalate the situation in Ukraine. We'll approve the missile use, and then Trump comes into a poisoned relationship again, and he won't be able to agree to some peace in Ukraine. So I think that's what explains why they've made this. But still, to achieve some sort of a tactical, political victory over your presidential opponent in this way, at the risk of nuclear war, implies that the Biden regime, that these people are insane. They're mentally insane. And we saw that, for example, in George Soros' son. He said he welcomed this attack on Russia with American missiles. Well, how in the world can you welcome something that the Russian government has said could very easily lead to a nuclear war? People have to be insane to see anything here other than the termination of life on Earth. There's no reason to be taking risk like this. Once again, I think Putin, as a humanitarian, he's will do everything he can to avoid letting the war widen. But he's got to know that sooner or later he's got to fight or surrender. And the Russian opposition isn't going to let him surrender. I mean, he'll simply be replaced. So it's coming to a fight unless it's stopped. Now, in the West, all the blame goes on Putin. He invaded Ukraine. Well, he did not invade Ukraine. He entered Donbass.
Right.
These are independent republics recognized by Russia, who asked for his protection against the Ukrainians who were slaughtering them.
Yeah.
And he said the whole operation is limited to Donbass. Well, this was a fatal mistake because by not taking Kiev out, he left Zelensky there for the Americans to widen the war. And they have widened it over 3 years to we're at the point that the Russian foreign ministry is saying, well, you're playing with Armageddon. You're playing with Armageddon. That's what they've said. Um, so it would have been much better if Putin had said, if I knock Ukraine out, they'll say I'm rebuilding the Soviet empire. But what hurts worse, words or me letting the Americans get involved by dilly-dallying
Yeah.
for 3 years? And then all the West prestige gets locked up in this war, and they've got to have a victory. And I don't understand why he didn't see that. I really don't. It's so plain, it's so clear, uh, and the consequences, you see, are now what they are.
You know, he was depending on the Western leaders to be more reasonable, but he should have learned from past experience that they are unreasonable. And Paul, also, what I find really curious in terms of insanity, the European countries that border the Russian area, they're in the direct line of fire, and they're going along with this escalation.
Right. Yeah.
So, I
Well,
mean,
they've been bought and paid. Washington has bought the leaders and paid them. They're all now worth $100 million. That's the way the United States government operates. I mean,
yeah,
I've said this before. My dissertation chairman
right.
uh, was Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, and he sent for me, wanted me to go to Vietnam and take over the aid programs, and I said nope. And I used the opportunity. I said, how do we get all these countries always to do what we want to do? He said, money. I said, oh, you mean foreign aid? He said, no. We give the leaders bagfuls of money. We own them. They report to us.
Yeah.
So he did not approve of this. It wasn't his doing. It was an established policy. There's nothing he could do about it. And if he tried to do anything about it, they would have kicked him out of the Pentagon. But this is the nature uh, of the situation.
That's some of the trillions of unaccounted for money that the Pentagon won't account for, right? Some of it goes to the European leaders.
That's now, Larry. This is important. I don't know if people are aware of this. The United States and NATO are already in violation of the Soviet war doctrine because the United States has in Romania and in Poland missile sites that house missiles that can carry conventional or nuclear warheads.
No.
They're there now, operational. You can't tell which they're set up to fire. They can change it overnight. So the Russians already have on their borders in 2 locations nuclear capable missiles that can hit Moscow, any of their facilities in a matter of minutes. So we are already in violation. We have already done the things that call forth the response in the new Russian war doctrine. We've already done that. So what's Putin, what's the Kremlin to do? They're going to let this now increase with bases in Ukraine that can also carry nuclear weapons. You see, we're causing a dilemma where Putin is running out of maneuvering room. He can't back up.
Yeah.
At some point, there's nowhere for him to back up to.
You know, people have made the comparison, the simple, obvious comparison that if Russia was supplying the Mexican government with missiles to shoot into parts of Texas, how would we respond to that? You know, it's an equivalency that nobody recognizes. You know, just like I keep bringing this up, you know, the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, when Khrushchev, with the then Soviet Union, brought nuclear missiles into Cuba 90 miles off our shore, we almost went to nuclear war with the Soviet Union because it was a direct threat 90 miles off our shore. They're bringing these missiles closer and closer to Russia's borders So how are they to respond?
Right. That's right. And you have to remember now, the reason Khrushchev put those missiles in Cuba was we put them in Turkey on Russia's border.
Right, right.
See, Russia gets blamed, or the Soviet Union rather, gets blamed
Yeah.
for the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was the fault of the United States
Yeah, in
because we
fact,
initiated it, putting nuclear missiles in Turkey on Russia's border.
right. And Kennedy quietly removed those missiles in Turkey sometime after the missile crisis in Cuba was resolved. So,
Uh,
Kennedy
that
realized
was
we were
that
wrong.
was the deal. The
Yeah,
deal he made with Khrushchev was, okay, you take them out of Cuba, and 6 months later, I'll quietly take them out of Turkey. But we mustn't let it be known that this is a deal we made, or I'll get overruled.
yeah. Yeah,
So he did it. He did it as a separate. Kennedy removed the missiles from Turkey as a separate, unrelated decision to the Cuban Missile Crisis,
right.
because they ended up killing him anyhow because they said he was soft on communism,
Yeah.
and I think he knew that if he was going to uh, announced that the deal was we take our missiles out and they take theirs out, that there would have just been endless denunciations of him for selling out America to the Red Plague or whatever. So, yeah. So here's the situation. The question, I think. Oh, by the way, we've already launched 6 of these missiles into Russia. We did that this morning.
Yeah.
And we launched them into an area, I think, that is outside Kursk.
Yes, yes.
And
That's part of the new escalation now. It's beyond that region.
so already, what the Pentagon was promised has been broken, because I don't think this region, I forget the name of it, but it borders Ukraine and Belarus. It's a part of Russia, and there's an ammunition dump there. And the United States, sent 6 missiles headed for that ammunition dump, but of course, Russian air defenses wiped them out. 5 of them were up in the air. One was damaged and fell somewhere and started a little fire, I think, out in the field or something. But so it may well be that Putin will simply say the American weapons are so useless they don't have to worry about them, because they just shoot them down. They see the Russians have deployed there the S-400,
Yeah.
and I don't think the United States has anything that can penetrate that. So Putin may simply say, "To hell with them." It's like they're shooting spitballs at us.
Hmm.
It's not going to. I just don't know, Larry. Uh, I suspect that Putin will try to avoid widening. But to repeat myself, he's running out of room.
Yeah, Paul, before we close this episode, and there's other topics we'll get onto later in this week, important topics. But considering what happened to Kennedy when he was going for détente with the Soviet Union, Trump is trying to normalize relations in a sense, to take down the war guns and negotiate things. What's ahead for Trump?
Well, that's a good question. You see, they've already tried to forestall it by this launch the missiles decision. Um, I don't know what Trump's done. I hope he had the presence of mind to get on the phone, call Putin, and say, "Look here, don't do anything. Put up with it. I'll be inaugurated in 2 months, and I'll completely change his policy."
Yeah.
That would of course save us from some terrible widening of this war. I don't know if Trump's done that, but that's what leadership demands of him, to do that. So it could well be that if Trump does that, he handles the situation, he forecloses the ability of the military security complex, the CIA, and all that, to commit him in a way he can't get out of to conflict with Russia. If he doesn't do that, he risks being committed because they can do other things. There are other things they can do that they haven't done. And they can so poison a relationship, or they can force a conflict that Trump can't get out of without looking like a traitor or a weak man or somebody who gave in to Putin, or what the media will say, and the Democrats. And so it's a serious situation. It's not hopeless for the two reasons that Trump could call Putin, and that Putin on his own could say, well, let's see how this goes before we do anything.
But yet, as we close now, Paul, you still believe that there is a real risk of this getting out of control before Trump takes office and we have a version of World War III.
Of course, yeah.